Since last time we recorded, now that the English podcast has been more accessible to people,
I'm glad.
apparently people are listening to the episode, especially my friends and colleagues, because it used to be only in Chinese, and they know I'm a podcaster for the past 3 years, but they couldn't really listen to most of them. And now that they get a chance to listen to our episodes and also a few prior, they share some thoughts, especially on the fatigue episodes. One of my coworker, my managers, in one of our one-on-one before the July shutdown, July holiday, we actually discussed about my episode, like how like she perceived like my fatigue, and then she shared some of her like tips on how to get more focused and don't feel like it's distracted always. And one tip she shared is that to carve out time, like focus time, where there's no meetings, it's just focus work. Outlook has this very nifty feature where you can set focus time, like desired like hours of the week to be focused, and then Outlook will insert like block your calendar basically, so other people can't book it. And I tried that for a while and kind of had that feature, and then I stopped using it. Now that my manager brought it up again, I might try it again.
You're revisiting it.
Yeah,
We have a similar thing at Google. There's focus times and there's focus days where you're not supposed to. And so your entire organization will automatically block out like half of your day and say, for this day of the week, everyone should sort of be focusing and not having meetings. It's a great gesture, and I think it works 80% of the time. It's still, people will sort of throw a meeting on your calendar anyways if there's something that they want to. And so sometimes someone else's focus time is them trying to fix something, means that they need to poke you and get your attention, which is like a little bit tricky at times. But
yeah.
it's nice that this sort of gesture and the feature exists across companies, that people try to sort of respect it.
And I find that this kind of Outlook automatic suggestion is good because they don't block whole day. They just block 1 or 2 hours. You can specify that the constraints. It's a tiny optimization algorithm going on, I suppose. And that way it's less intrusive to my day-to-day work, but also give me 2 hours of just deep focus work. I don't have to take meetings. And then the second feedback I heard from another coworker is that he takes meetings. He usually takes meetings not at his desk. So he recommended me install all this like company software on my phone, and then I can take meetings away from desk. Like sometimes he's walking, sometimes he's commuting, doing chores, and one of his recommendation, like the kind of highest recommendation, is to just lying down. He either in a very cozy chair or in bed. That's his recommendation. He said that helps him recharge. And of course, he's doing all those things like not turning on video. So not every meeting can be audio only, but I'm pretty sure on your like calendars there are certain meetings that you can take with audio only, and ones that you have to be like show your face. I want to hear like any thoughts on that.
I think that's a great idea, and I've noticed that people do that before. I've never thought about consciously choosing to do that. So my manager has one-on-ones with his whole team, right? And there's about 9 of us that he oversees, and then he'll do all of those walking. So he'll go up and be like, "Want to get a coffee?" And then he won't be getting coffee every time because otherwise he's getting 9 coffees or whatever. But like he has these spread and sprinkled throughout the week, and anytime he has a one-on-one, he's like, let's go on a walk around the building and just like take a lap, or let's do something. And I couldn't tell if at first it's just like, oh, they don't need a screen. And then someone made a comment that like, oh, you're having a one-on-one. Are you guys gonna get coffee? Because that's just what he does every time. And it's kind of nice to sort of step away from your desk. And I think it makes it way more comfortable to talk about things that aren't work. Because when you're in front of your laptop, you have to sort of, okay, bring up the results or show me the link, or who's like, where's the ticket for this or whatever. And so when you're just like kind of casually talking about it, you can go a little bit more relaxed and go, this is what we're trying to do, or this is what we have planned to do. And then also I'm curious about like career opportunities or growth and stuff like that. And you feel more comfortable talking about that when you're just like sitting down, grabbing a coffee, or like taking a walk around the building. And so his whole week kind of gets broken up by lots of these little short walks everywhere. And it's really nice. Now, when you're doing it sort of remotely, it's hard because now I have to do it over Zoom, but I guess I could like hold it up and do Google Meets on my phone,
Yeah.
which I haven't really tried.
That
But yeah,
yeah, you lead it nicely into our like topic today, which is like how does distributed team work? And and so you mentioned you are not co-located with the manager. So doing your one, like if you are sometimes when you travel, you are co-located, but most of the time you're not. So you
yeah.
still take meetings like Google Chats or like Zoom like interface.
Yeah, so all of mine are happening through like Google video calls or like Google Meet. And my team is based mostly out of San Francisco. I'm in New York City. And so our there's a couple of things that you sort of have to work around when you're doing something like this. So it's not just that we're not in the same office, we're in different time zones. And so there's a lot of planning. And that has its pros and cons. Uh, Essentially, I get my mornings as focus time. Like no one is bothering me because no one's awake yet, or they're not in the office yet. So I have it pretty much until lunch, where I can sort of just get things done, work on like additional projects and like really prepare. And then once after lunch once the afternoon hits, it's just like lots of meetings and like syncing up people on what I've done so far. But and then doing sort of live like chat with them as well, without having to too much time to myself where I can work. But then once it's the end of my day, those sort of like just put things on for me to do for the next day. Um, but the remote stuff is tricky in that it's all happening via video interface, right? And we all learned during the pandemic it's good, but it's not as good, right? You're missing on cues. It's hard. Sometimes one person's talking, the other one wants to talk, and then you're kind of doing this awkward dance. And it's more of it changes like the communication style. Like when you're in person, you can sort of like nod, agree, and also like interject a couple of phrases here and there, just to show that you understand what's going on. Over video, it really is just like a serialized. Like you get a chunk of time to talk, and then I'll stop talking, and you'll get a chance to talk.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the video cuts out, or it just doesn't work out as well. And that can be kind of awkward. Not to mention just the like mishearing each other because of audio quality stuff. They're also very careful about asking if things are pushing into like 5, 6, whatever. They're like, feel free to move this around, or this may not be ideal for you. Let me know. We can try and find another time. Just because they know that's like getting later, and that's when they would be looking to leave, or they have to pick up their kids or whatever. So they don't want to impose that on me. Anything that's like larger, and I'm not the like the lead, then it's just I get thrown to the side, and it's like, okay, there's a meeting at 8 p.m. There's 30 people in it. Join if you want. It's going to be recorded. Don't worry about it. And then essentially they say to update the logs and the decks and whatever to make sure that my stuff is in there. And that someone will, if there's follow-up questions, they'll reach out to me after. But there's no expectation that I'm there for anything that starts after 6 or 7. It's always nice. And anytime I've attended one of those things, they call out and they're like, thanks for making it. There's a couple of people from the East Coast here, or like, that's really great. But there's no expectation that I attend those, which is nice. Because in the beginning, especially when you start a job, I was attending every single one because I didn't know what they were about. I wanted to impress, all these things. And then now I know that a lot of them are just kind of like really optional. I don't really need to be there. Or if I've listed everything kind of clearly in the logs, there's no need for me to be there in person. They can sort of just look at the bug and see it there.
How can you tell if a meeting is something that you have to be there or you don't have to be there?
That is the $1 million question when you work in industry. I think you have to be very careful about what you want to take out of the meeting and what other people might need from you. So if you know that people are waiting on you, you should probably attend this meeting and make sure to soothe and relax any of the concerns that might be there. If you need to touch base with someone, rather than doing it one-on-one, if you can just do it in the meeting, that's great. If there's nothing to add and you're sort of just talking just because like it's on the calendar, then people here at least are very good about trying to get time back and saying, okay, let's just cut this short. Or like, is there any updates? Yes, no, okay, good. Let me know if there are. And that's usually how it's done. But I've been in a couple of meetings where everyone sort of goes around and just feels the need that they have to say an update when there really is no update. Uh, and then usually after one or two of those meetings, someone will sort of speak up and say like, "Hey, maybe we can cut this meeting in half," and like we will move it from the calendar from being an hour to half an hour or 15 minutes sync, whatever it is, to try and keep that effort going. Like, okay, we really don't need to update this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one more follow-up question on the topic of meeting, and then we should move on to the other ones.
Sure.
So you mentioned people just feel like they need to just talk about what they work on, although they don't have a lot to update. And that sounds somewhat similar to a kind of daily stand-up type of thing. Do you have
But then
stand-up in your team or no?
we'll have syncs. Yeah. So we'll do one-on-one syncs with managers, and then each team will do like a weekly sync, and then like a level above that, we'll do like a team-wide or org-wide sync also weekly.
Yeah, weekly stand-up, I think they're more they're
Mhm.
easier to justify because like I think a week is a long time, and
Yeah.
usually people have something to update within that time. But like for daily stand-up, it's tricky because when are really crunching out stuff, there are usually a lot of things to update. So daily stand-up makes sense. But in some other part of the year, like maybe things are slower, like you're maybe just waiting for other teams to unblock you. So not a lot of updating. The reason why I ask about this daily stand-up routine is I heard this metaphor from a senior engineer on our team. I respect his work philosophy a lot, and this is one of them. He basically said like daily stand-up is like working out. You don't see immediately benefits at all, maybe a little bit, but you only see the effect when it's become part of your team, part of your routine. And if you don't do that for a long time, you start to the team start to become unhealthy and people don't know each other, so working on and so on and so forth. So that's one of the reasons he kind of recommended to the whole team we should do daily or kind of every other day stand up to make sure we're on sync. And when I was a junior member at the team, I did not fully understand that decision. I said, okay, maybe because it's like more like a top down imposing, like I see that thing on my calendar and then every other people is attending, so I should probably attend as well.
Exactly.
And now that I'm in a more like senior role in this a new team that we're setting up, and I feel like I get to appreciate the philosophy much more. I kind of know it's really important to keep the team cohesive and everybody on the same page. Yeah, what do you think?
I think what you touched on there is really important. It's essentially like a point of view. If you're a manager looking down on your team, you're not necessarily coding as much, and so you need to just keep track that everything is moving forward and that it's all heading in the right direction, right? And you want to know that everything fits in place. But when you're the individual contributor, like beneath that manager, you're really focused on just your product and you don't really care if it breaks the person next to you. You're just like, I need this to happen so that I can keep going forward. So then you sort of see these updates as like a waste of time. Seems harsh, but it's just like once I've said my part, you kind of like zone out a little bit when other people are talking because you're like, okay, whatever, it doesn't really impact me. The manager knows that it does impact you. Like all these things are playing together, and that not only that, you can learn from other people's updates or what's going on there. And so it definitely keeps the team healthier and the manager appreciates it more. But the individual contributor beneath them, and I think is kind of just like, okay, cool. Like the next 15 minutes here, I could be doing something else. It's interesting. I've seen the mix, and it's extremely common for people to go to these syncs and bring their laptops and just like look up, say what they need to say, and then go back down and just keep working. And they keep working as if they're back at their desk, and they completely ignore everything that's going on. Like you have to like get their attention when you're trying to talk to them. And that's fine. And no one seems to mind, which to me is interesting because I'm like so used to like, maybe I need to hear something here and I don't know yet. And then there's other people who kind of just go and then don't bring their laptop or like really focused on like the discussion that's going on there. I think it depends on the person really, what their style is. Because to me, I'm still in the junior age where I'm like, okay, some of these things like we could just like over chat asynchronously go, okay, is there something to update? Yes, no, all right, we can cancel this meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason why this is kind of related to distributed team is that when if every single team member is in the same location, then there will be more like hallway conversation. There will be more lunch conversation. So a lot of
Yeah.
this get the pulse thing can be felt in those other places. But if team members are distributed or remote, then we have to kind of force this like rituals to make sure we have a place to get the
Yeah.
pulse. Yeah.
It's a stand-in for that pulse. Like it's essentially like if we all were in the same room already, you would already know from just like turning around and being like, okay, that person's working on it or whatever. Uh, but it's like you said, it's this pulse that you don't get if people are distributed. And it sort of ties into another topic, which is the fact that no one can see you working when you're working distributed or remotely, which plays a couple of different factors where you feel like you're not, when you are working, you feel like no one notices because you're not being appreciated or they're not commenting except for the syncs when you bring it up and they're like, okay, cool. I had no idea you did that. And then when you're like stuck or when you're not working, people also don't notice. Or if you get stuck and you've been working the entire time, like you worked 2 days back to back trying to get something to work, but you didn't get anywhere, then when people only sync with you and they see that you're still in the same spot, they get the impression that you weren't working, that you like took that day off, even though you really were working really hard. And so that's kind of like the tricky part about these syncs is you feel like you always need to have something to show just to prove that you showed up to your desk and that you were working, because otherwise they couldn't tell. Whereas if you're in person, you have that sort of sense and that pulse because you see the person pulling their hair out and working at the desk. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a challenge. Okay, enough of meetings. We talk a lot. um, Next topic on list is like work from home. Because distributed team, chances are your team is like some of them choose work from home a few days a week, and sometimes they go into offices. So what's your ratio?
Yeah. So we officially have this policy of hybrid, of like 3 days in office, mandatory, and 2 days in office or at home. I have a really easy commute, so I'd say probably about 4 days a week I'm in the office. It only takes me about 12, 15 minutes door to door, which means I can like start working at home, especially since my team isn't even awake yet. They're on the West Coast. And then by the time it's like lunch, I come in and then I take all my meetings in these like nice rooms and all that. And so I can sort of do a hybrid where I'm doing both and sort of going to the office regularly, but I don't need to be there the whole day just because it's such a quick commute. What about you?
I think our company's policy is half of the time. Like we call our workers flexible workers. So it's 2.5, like 2.5 days in office, 2.5 at home. Like, of course, it doesn't have to be like at a week level. You just look
Yeah.
at zoom out at the like, yeah, monthly or quarterly level, around half of the time in office, half of the time at home. And our particular team is even more flexible than that. So like I personally go into office 2 days a week. And in the Seattle office, we kind of set the Thursdays to be our in-person day. So that's the day where most researchers and other employees will go to the, like you can see the cafeteria is full and the parking garage is full. And then I pick another day depending on my weekly schedule and to go into the office. Yeah.
It's especially with distributed teams, it's like hard to know where people are, and you sort of just assume that they're at the office or that they're at home, depending on whatever their usual schedule is. And then I think the way that the companies measure it is kind of what you said. Well, at least for us, they check how many people are scanning into lunch, and that's how they can get a good head count. I'm not sure that that's officially the way they do it because we can also scan in when we're walking into the building, but you definitely see a spike at certain times of the day or certain days of the week. And then part of it is tricky because like a lot of people work from home here and there, or they work from the office, and then you can just like very easily change your background to be like whatever it is that you want. And so if you're always a person who has a background on, then this person, they could be in Europe, they could be in Brazil, they could be in the US, they could be at their desk in the office, and you won't really know. Which I think is a plus. Like if you can get your work done and it's not distracting you, by all means, I think you should do that. I have nothing against it, but it just means you don't really know who the person, where they are, or whether you can sort of go over to their desk and talk to them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they I, I work fully remote for like during the pandemic from like early 2020 to end of last year, like so almost like 3 full years of fully remote. And I learned this work habit of just slacking people whenever I have a chance. Because previously I was, oh, hey, let's I will wait till lunchtime because I
But
know he is like before the pandemic. Everybody goes to office every day. I know I'm
yeah,
gonna see him at lunch, so I just postpone that question till lunch. And
but
sometimes it work out perfectly. We get into a nice conversation, but most of the time I kind of missed him because it's a big office. It's just impossible. I maybe get into another interesting conversation with another person. But now I know I'm not gonna run into him at lunchtime. I'll just Slack him, and then if the question is really easy to resolve, then we'll just a few back and forth and it's done. Otherwise, we can schedule a separate meeting. So I think that's something I've learned. I think it benefits me like working remotely. Even now that I'm back in the office, my default is although I can see that guy over there, it's just like three
you're
three
gonna shoot
cubicles
him a
away.
message.
I'm still gonna Slack him because it's on the record. It's easier. Like yeah,
There's definitely benefits to it. It feels weird. I do it being a remote worker or being distributed. I'm on the East Coast, my team's on the West. All our communications via message. It has to be, right, because that's how we're always talking, unless it's during a sync. And then I was visiting the office on the West Coast, and people were still messaging me when I was like a few cubicles away, and I was like, guys, I am here now. I'm like, this is the time where you can come up and talk to me. But I think it's nice to have it on the record, and some people just sort of prefer that communication also, whether it's like socially they don't want to talk physically in front of someone, or they feel more comfortable, or they just like to have the records, or you can just use like all the emojis and the memes that you want
yeah,
to sort of soften whatever conversation it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people prefer to like group their chats to respond at the same time. Like they want to just work for the hour and then respond to Slack messages, and I don't want to work up to them and then interrupt their whatever
Yeah,
that they're working on.
exactly.
Yeah,
It sort of lets it be sort of like a background notification that they'll
yeah.
get to later. And I think it's important to have that. It's all about the culture you build, right? So like uh working from home I think is wonderful because it's so flexible.
Adobe, um, even for interns, we encourage them to be flexible, so they don't have to come into work every day. Although most of them still do because they're renting a place. The place may not have good work from home, like equipment
Yeah,
and everything set up.
Wi-Fi, all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they don't get to see me every day because I'm flexible. I'm only coming in like half of the time,
Yeah.
so it gives them a glimpse of what their full-time coworkers are like.
What are doing.
Yeah,
Does
and
it does it stress them out because they want to be there when you're there and they don't know when you're going to be there? Do you tell them ahead of time? How's your
yeah, I
schedule?
have a relatively fixed schedule during the summer. I just tell them here are the 2 or 3 days. There are 2 days I'm definitely coming in, Thursdays, and then like I think for now it's Monday and Thursdays. And sometimes I go in one extra day, but those 2 days you're guaranteed to see me. So if you are around, we can meet in person. But if you want to take those 2 days off, we can meet through Teams like that. That works
Yeah.
too. Um, and they seem to they're not freaking out at least so far. It seems it's fine. Yeah.
At some point, we need to discuss how managers will never be able to tell if the people they're managing are freaking out until it's probably too late. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
we do can do this all this like posting, like we fill out a form and then like I don't know how detailed they go into analyzing the statistics, but I think it's we're trying to measure that. Our managers are trying to manage that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, but it's good. I like you're in there a couple of days, and then you have sort of a fixed schedule where other people, at least during the summer, know where they can find you. Um, yeah, it's just it varies so much. Like every person I know sort of has their own schedule. And it sort of almost encourages these magical hallway conversations, or you call them hallway conversations. We call them magical hallway conversations.
Magical, okay.
I don't know why here at Google, but that's where a lot of Google products have come out in the past is like people bumping into each other in the hallways and having these discussions. And so they're always sort of encouraging different teams to mix or end up in the same cafeteria or whatever. And a lot of that happens from coming in the office.
Two more topics that we can talk about. One is you mentioned mentorship over Zoom, and also would you take a fully in-person job in the future? Um,
So
maybe yeah.
I think on the topic of fully in-person job in the future, I think that's tricky, right? Like once you've tried it, you can see the benefits. And even when I'm like fully going into the office every day of the week, I still like to know that the option is there. Like if something were to come up, I could go home. Um, and for whatever reason, that didn't feel like the case pre-pandemic. Like I'm sure people have really nice managers, and it didn't like actually it wouldn't be held against them if they went home a couple of days, but it just wasn't the norm, right? So you sort of were expected to everyone do your commute in the morning at the same time and then go home, and like that's what everyone thought.
Yeah.
Now you kind of have this freedom of like, oh, I'm working from home this day, let's get coffee, like because I know you're also going to be working from home that day, let's all get coffee at the same time and catch up. And it's just like um I think it adds this extra dimension to of our lives, both in complexity, but also just like in freedom of we don't have to be defined by our like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job. And I think that's like definitely a discussion people should be having. Um, that's like a very personal opinion of mine. I also just like this sort of hybrid schedule because let's say Monday or Friday you work from home, there's plenty of people I know who can get most of their work done Monday through Thursday. And so they do this, they switch into this 4-day work week, which I know some companies are testing and whatever, but like you can just do that if you're acceptable, your team's okay with it, and you're like still answering messages if they get sent to you. But if you can get most of your work done and be as productive, then I think it's great. Like, and that's only with a hybrid or like a work from home schedule.
Yeah, yeah. The reason why I asked this question is like whenever in LinkedIn there are constant recruiters reaching out,
Yeah.
and most of them is just not what I'm interested in. But sometimes when really something come up, this is what usually the first question I ask, like, dude, what's your remote policy? What's your hybrid policy? And that's surprisingly in this day and age, it's still a good filter because a lot of company will say we are fully in-person company. We don't allow like hybrid. Like hybrid does not kind of work. Like
Yeah.
it's surprising to hear that. Like although I know all my coworkers they're as productive or even more productive at home because they have better setup because
Yeah.
they can be more relaxed at home. They know stuff at home is being taken care of like chores and like contractors.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's also there's fatigue associated with the commute. There's like no way to deny that like you don't want there's some days where you just don't want to go, even if it's 12, 15 minutes. So for some people it's like an hour, or it's just like the subway stopped working, or it's raining, all these things. Or I'm gonna be late to this meeting. So now that added stress. Whereas if I was just at home, I'm not necessarily late because I switch from one room to the other, I turn on my laptop and now I'm on time, right? So it's all these little stress factors where it's like it's adding stress to your day and anxiety to your day, whether it's a commute, whether it's not being able to be home, or your kid is sick, or just like I did all my work already, but I still have to go like put on the suit and like sit there at my desk just because I'm supposed to be here that day and someone needs to see me there at the desk. I think if you're doing your work and you're being productive, it's fine. If you're struggling, you're falling behind, it's definitely better to go in and have like this sort of collaborative work atmosphere or have people sort of support you. But I think the more years you're into it, the more independent people become. And I think that then it's okay. They can take care of themselves.
I would personally would not take a fully in-person job. I kind of maybe hybrid is a good for me right now.
Yeah.
And because a few years ago during the pandemic, I thought I'm gonna full in remote. I did not like in person because then I don't have to
Yeah.
commute and everything. But then I realized there is this like in-person factor that's just it's hard to rule out. Like right now, we don't have metaverse, we don't have the same immersive experience yet, and in-person gathering and discussion is just it helps bridge that last mile
Yeah.
gap.
They're definitely not the same. So the fully remote, if your whole team is fully remote, that's fine, especially if they're distributed. If you're the only remote one, you're missing out on a lot of these like physical interactions and hallway conversations. But fully in office also just seems so antiquated. It just seems so ancient, and it's all this added stress. So I like hybrid. I also like hybrid when it's flexible, like you can choose the days yourself. Because if it's hybrid but it's like fixed days, then it's sort of just like I don't know. It doesn't. It loses a lot of that flexibility. Also, like some people are okay working when they're traveling, or like they'll go to a different country and work out of a cafe and be as productive, and then also get to like enjoy and live their lives. Like I think that's amazing. I have a couple of friends who did that and ended up eventually moving to a different city they never thought they would live in because they got to experience it. So I think people are living sort of more complete lives by having either the hybrid or the fully remote. And so I don't think I would go back to fully in office unless it was already in a place that I knew that I was going to be or settled out and was okay with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Hard to say. Yeah. So the last point, mentorship over Zoom. Love to hear that.
I think that one is particularly tricky because like a lot of mentorship comes from outside of the one-on-one syncs. It comes from like setting up the infra or like showing people how to do their jobs in like multiple different ways so that they can sort of learn from themselves what they like and also see the flexibility for like how to do things differently or like create their own new version. And that's just like a like a work like pipeline or like how people like to work. But then there's like a lot of these softer things of like talking about, are they happy? Are they having a good time? Where do they see themselves? Do they like working with this person or that person? And when you're doing it over a Zoom, it just feels so formal. You feel like you have to say this or that, or you have to like please everyone or whatever it is. And it just doesn't feel like you can like sort of relax, talk about it. It's hard to create that atmosphere. And it's also like, you know, you're going to be in a meeting and you like sit and prepare and you stare at the screen. It's definitely not the same. So I feel like special attention has to be paid if you're sort of like a mentor or manager and you're dealing with Zoom. It's not necessarily that you have to do it in person. It's just that you have to create these separate channels, like the fun, relaxed channel, the work channel, whatever, so that people can feel comfortable bringing up these side topics. And then also like have someone on the same time zone or on the same coast or like the same office that they can turn to at different levels of experience to sort of help them with that sort of mentorship part, like, oh, where do you go if like I need a charger or the cable is not working, whatever. Like all these little questions that feel like they're silly to ask or to like create a meeting for. A lot of this comes into like how comfortable you are at the job. And then also just like your growth at the job is like, I don't get to see the interactions between my boss and his boss and their boss, right? Like, cause that's all happening in a different place altogether. And so it's nice when my manager tells me about their relationship or like how their relationship has changed or how I can sort of what I'm missing out on. And that's something that he just has to know to bring up to me, the things that happen in person that I didn't get to see. Cause those are part of my growth also, is like understanding the relationship between all the different teams when all I do is interact with the 4 different teams that are related to like my feature. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that in Zoom, just it feels different. Would you think, do you think maybe a one-on-one in like a fully virtual environment would help with that mentality?
I don't know. It's hard to say without ever having tried it. I feel like it will be in a new experience altogether, but closer to Zoom than it is to in person, just because we're still you're the feeling of putting on something or interacting with something is still there of like, I have to go into a room to take a call, or I have to have a computer. I have to have access to something other than just me walking and getting coffee, right? Like I need to be punctual for a certain time and place in order for this meeting to happen. Whereas the whole point of like in person, you can sort of like just wander off or it happens spontaneously. This is like, we have a scheduled meeting at a certain time. I need to put on my headset, and then I need to like do these 4 gestures. Like I need to speak clearly into the mic, or I have to wait for someone else to talk in order for it to happen. If it's like seamless and like people are talking, and then maybe then it works, but I don't know.
Have you tried Starline?
I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't
Enlighten me.
heard, I haven't tried it because I just haven't, but I watch a lot of YouTubers experience it, and their reaction was like, oh, this is the future. They feel like they're having a
I
in-person
think
conversation with that their whatever that's on the other side. So I think, I don't know if that will, the feeling that we're chatting through a screen will change with better technology
Mhm.
or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I hope so, because it's definitely something that we didn't address in time for the pandemic. It would have been really nice to have this figured out before the world shut down completely. And then it showed us the need for it. But I still have yet to see like a solution. And a lot of it just goes down to different communication channels, right? Like uh, you can leave a bunch of artifacts for people to look at on a bug, or you can send Slack messages, or you can do a call, or you can meet them in person. It's kind of like sometimes you text, sometimes you call, sometimes you leave a voice note. Like each one of them serves like a slightly different purpose, and they're all sort of useful. Um, the Zoom meeting still works really well for a lot of things. It's just not as comfortable because of the punctuality that you have to be scheduled and you have to be in a certain place with a
Yeah.
certain background.
And also you mentioned earlier, like the fact that it takes turns. You wait for other people to finish and then you
Yeah,
start. And that's
exactly.
not how most real world conversation goes. We interrupt, we know, like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's uh, I've had experiences with like mentors and managers and coworkers where if someone doesn't say something, then they get the idea that they didn't get it, and so they'll keep talking and they'll just repeat it in like different ways, which like sometimes is the case. Like in person, if the person is not giving you any cues, that makes sense. But over Zoom, it's because they have to wait for you to finish talking. And so like I'm not gonna like raise my hand in the meeting every single time once I get it. And so it's just like these additional cues that are lacking.
There is this like a Teams has this feature recently. It's called like speaker coach or speech coach or something.
Okay.
You can turn it on and it's only to me. Like when I turn it on, it doesn't turn on for you. It's just for me.
Yeah.
And it will coach me, hey, you've been talking for too long. Let the other side speak for a bit. And
Go
yeah.
ahead.
And then
We
at the end, you also like show a statistic or something like this is the percentage that you talked. You
yeah.
are like above average or below average. You should like
Yeah.
some suggestions. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of related to what you spoke just
We
now.
have the same thing for like meets. But then it's almost the opposite. It's like it doesn't sound like you're talking very much. It's like encouraging everyone to talk more, and it doesn't ever discourage the person who's talking the most from talking less. It's just like, okay, you're falling behind, or like you should really talk a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have this like a internal conference event or something. It's called Adobe for All events, and then internally we the goal is to like basically bring everybody awareness to some topics, and one of the topic is like diversity and include everybody's voice. And this topic came up like the meeting host is very cognizant of letting everybody speak in the meeting,
Mhm.
and that's when somebody in the group mentioned this feature. Hey, you should try the speaker coach because that does that automatically, and it's not like
Yeah.
it's computer, so it's not it knows the percentage very well.
Yeah.
So if you trust that statistic, you can use that as one starting point. So you don't have to like writing a notepad. Hey, and he talk for 5 minutes, and then next we need to ask Ding to talk about 5 minutes, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good feature, and I think it's something people should be more aware of. Is like how much time they spend talking versus others. Like I talked a lot during this podcast episode, and so it's like how do you also include other people in the conversation in terms of like making sure they understand, letting them show what they know, and then like making them feel included. And I think like that might be a great idea for another episode. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, this has been great. So before we wrap up, like if you have any experience working in a distributed team, you have any thoughts or tips
Yeah.
on like work productivity and basically to have anything to help you work better, leave a comment, let us know.
Okay.
And with that, thank you all for tuning in, and
Thanks, guys.
bye.